mansplaining is used quite a bit.
Wait, let me interrupt you.
Yeah.
You may think you know what mansplaining is, but maybe if you opened up your tiny little girl brain for a second,
Thank you.
I'll explain it to you. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, there is a great example. It's like how to know if you're mansplaining. If you speak like Nando towards me, there it is. That's a hack. No, you're very good about not mansplaining. Normally, that present example not included. Okay. But we're going to get into what mansplaining really means and how to know if you yourself are mansplaining. So the term mansplaining is often credited as being created by the writer Rebecca Solnit, who defines it as the intersection between overconfidence and cluelessness, where some portion of that gender gets stuck.
First off, there's already a word for this. It's called arrogance.
It's such fun to learn words.
And arrogance is contemptible behavior regardless of the perpetrator's private parts. Mansplaining, used as a pejorative, implies that such behavior is only unacceptable if it's done by a man to a woman.
So very blatant examples of this is like when somebody on Twitter corrects like a PhD scientist female on her science. Like, right, a guy like goes in and corrects somebody who's clearly an expert, but he wants to correct her science for some reason. He's not an expert, right? So there's scenarios like that.
What a great idea. Let's all appeal to authority. Yeah, science does not progress by simply accepting conventional wisdom while refusing to challenge experts. Cecilia Payne and Annie Jump Cannon were two astronomers that dared challenge their superiors. Should they have just known their place by appealing to authority? As Payne famously stated, if you are sure of your facts, you should defend your position. Look at Paul Krugman. He's a Nobel Prize winning economist and he's wrong all the fucking time. In fact, there are plenty of so-called academics and experts that are wrong about a lot of things. But again, is it only bad when an average man argues with a female expert? Does this same rule apply when an average woman argues with a male expert?
But what gives you the right to say that? I mean, maybe that's how women want their relationships, those women. I mean, you're making these vast generalizations.
I'm a clinical psychologist.
Or let's consider the Ben Affleck-Sam Harris exchange. Ben Affleck was harassing an expert on a topic that he himself knew little about, which is surprising considering that Affleck made Argo. Would Affleck's behavior have somehow been less acceptable if Sam Harris were Samantha Harris?
Absolutely fucking not.
Now, there are also some, when you're in person, besides Twitter, because Twitter, I think it's a little bit more obvious. There are also some body language cues that you can look at to see if somebody is mansplaining, right? So they had a body language expert sort of break this down. Now, space is a dead giveaway when it comes to identifying mansplaining. Whether consciously or unconsciously, the mansplainer often surges into unoccupied space to make himself seem larger or to physically intimidate the mansplainee.
If we're talking about entering people's personal space as a means of intimidation, I don't disagree. But again, intimidation is unacceptable if it's between two males or two females. To isolate this as a man-on-woman issue is stupid because it's a dick move regardless. As for taking credit for someone else's ideas, again, there's already a term for this: plagiarism.
It's such fun to learn words.
By the way, is this Fisher-Price commercial considered mansplaining? Anyway, plagiarism is also a dick move regardless of gender, just like arrogance and intimidation. This is why mansplaining is a useless term, because it lumps together things like theft, intimidation, and arrogance as if these behaviors are not already bad on their own in isolation.
You can sort of see this here, but also when we were watching the Republican debate, the third one, right? When Trump was like physically entering the space, you can see that he's trying to take up that space and use that as a means to sort of, I guess, like speak over Hillary Clinton, right? And so I think that's often used, and you can space, whether that be physical space, but also I just think space in like the room, right? When you're thinking about how loud people are speaking, and like when somebody's trying to speak over you or take credit for your ideas and things like that can be a form of mansplaining. So experts say that it can involve actually moving into that physical space like we spoke about, but also more subtle moves to like manspread into empty air, like folding arms, putting feet up on a desk, or putting hands in a belt loop.
If displaying some of these postures and gestures is considered mansplaining, then I'm guilty as charged. And I'm gonna keep mansplaining with my body language, because body language like this communicates confidence and power. There's nothing wrong with establishing yourself with a power pose.
Well, the first chapter I have in my book is called Stand Up Straight with Your Shoulders Back. And it's an injunction to be combative, not least to further your career, let's say, but also to adopt a stance of ready engagement with the world and to reflect that in your posture.
Fake it till you become it. You know, it's not do it enough until you actually become it and internalize. The last thing I want to leave you with is this. Tiny tweaks can lead to big changes. So this is 2 minutes. 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. Before you go into the next stressful evaluative situation, for 2 minutes, try doing this in the elevator, in a bathroom stall, at your desk behind closed doors. That's what you want to do. Configure your brain to cope the best in that situation. Get your testosterone up, get your cortisol down. Don't leave that situation feeling like, oh, I didn't show them who I am. Leave that situation feeling like, oh, I really feel like I got to say who I am and show who I am. So I want to ask you first, both to try power posing, and also I want to ask you to share this science, because this is simple. I don't have ego involved in this. Give it away, share it with people, because the people who can use it the most are the ones with no resources and no technology and no status and no power. Give it to them, because they can do it in private. They need their bodies, privacy, and 2 minutes. And it can significantly change the outcomes of their life.
Who in their right mind wants to come off as weak while balling up like a damn turtle? That shit's for losers.
Ooh.
So if you were like...
Do people still do that?
You would be surprised at the moves that men make when you're talking to them sometimes. It's almost like trying to be intimidating, but show that you're taking up more space. So if you're speaking to a man and he puts his hand up on the wall next to you, or if he's just clearly bored and whatever while you're speaking or something like that, or just relaxing or something like that, and you are trying to speak about something important, it's a means of sort of taking up and showing that your opinion or what you have to say is not worthy. Yeah, exactly. Another way is raising your voice, like I said, and speeding up the conversation as a way of asserting dominance, a sort of verbal iteration of manspreading. Another one. There's a lot of man stuff going on in this video. But yeah, sort of just trying to dominate the conversation in general. Is a way of mansplaining. Now, you're not going to get called out for mansplaining each time that you do it, but you have to go into every conversation aware that it exists and that you could be guilty of it, right? So at the very least, you should try putting yourself in the shoes of the person that you're talking to. And
they want me to go into every conversation knowing that mansplaining exists? If people like Hannah Cranston and Nando Villa are honestly advocating that I specifically be extra careful and aware of my communication while talking to a woman as opposed to anyone else, then they're essentially advocating that I treat women differently, which is sexist. Why would I talk to a woman any differently than I talk to a man? I'm sure it's something patriarchy and how all men do it subconsciously and don't know it.
Blow it out your ass! Blow it out your ass! Blow it out your ass!
Perhaps most importantly, if you want to know if you're mansplaining, just ask yourself, was your explanation requested? So I get a little bit worried about that one, right? Because sometimes I do think that people like if you have an opinion or something like that, of course you can interject, right? And I think that is important.
Hannah is absolutely right. Why in the blue hell does it matter if my input was requested or not? If someone, whether male or female, is wrong about something, don't you have an obligation to correct or at least question them? If someone starts spewing nonsense about how the earth is flat or announces that they made a life-altering decision based on a horoscope and doesn't request my input, am I supposed to just zip it and let them continue life being misled? What if a woman starts spouting about how vaccines cause autism, and I refuse to correct her because that would be mansplaining? And she ends up having a kid that she refuses to vaccinate. As Ayn Rand womansplains, one must speak up in situations where silence can objectively be taken to mean agreement with or sanction of evil. When one deals with irrational persons where argument is futile, a mere "I don't agree with you" is sufficient to negate any implication of moral sanction. When one deals with better people, a full statement of one's views may be morally required. But in no case and in no situation may one permit one's own values to be attacked or denounced and keep silent.
Thank you.
What's an example? Like, have you been mansplained to pawn?
I have. In college, I used to be mansplained a lot because I was an economics minor, and so unfortunately, there were not a lot of women in my economics classes. And I would go to these sort of office hour things where we would be working with the professor, and these guys, I don't know if they were trying to show off or they just thought they were a lot smarter than me, would be like,
economists are the worst. They really are.
I think they are, but they would come and they would like correct my work. And they would be like, "Oh no, you don't understand. Like this is how it works." Da 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 da. And then like,
the irony
I
being
did
that
way better on all the tests than they did. So I was like, "All right."
The irony being that it's well known that economics departments are just wrong about everything. Like, because economics is not a real science the way like biology is,
right,
or something.
Yeah.
You know, but they behave and act like they are like dealing with scientific truths, right? And what they're really just kind of like make-believe theory, you know, like akin to like astrology.
Nigga, get the fuck out of here.
Economics is not a science? In all fairness, as I mentioned about Paul Krugman earlier, many economists and schools of economics are laughably incorrect. And the markets are constantly distorted given America's fiat monetary system and the existence of the Federal Reserve. So part of me does not blame people like this guy for thinking this way, considering that economic myths and misconceptions are constantly flying around. On the other hand, there are in fact economic laws and truths that consistently play out whenever experimented. Economics is not akin to fucking astrology. The nerve of these people to spend 11 minutes explaining a useless concept like mansplaining, only to dismiss economics as make-believe, akin to astrology. And they do this while calling their YouTube channel Think Tank, as if they're educational. Mansplaining is a useless, outrageous term that's meant to convince guys to shut up, which benefits nobody.
And so when you have something to say and you don't say it, then not only do you miss an opportunity to articulate yourself properly, which is really fundamentally necessary, but you tell yourself right down to the level of your soul that there's less of you than there could be. And that makes the next retreat even more likely. And so you can easily initiate a positive feedback loop where you retreat and you get a little smaller and your enemy gets a little bigger, and then you retreat again and you get a little smaller and your enemy gets a little bigger. It's a recipe for cowering in the corner and freezing. And so, you know, you might be afraid to say what you have to say, and you might have every reason to be afraid, but you should even be more afraid of not saying what you have to say, because the consequences of that, as they accrue over the long term, are they'll undermine everything for you. They'll undermine your faith in yourself, they'll undermine your family, they'll undermine your society. That is not a place you want to go.
Guys, if anyone ever accuses you of mansplaining, chances are they're accusing you of the crime of telling the truth.